So, you're a DM now. You understand what your role is as a DM. You are a storyteller, teacher, the rules itself. Now, let's take all that stuff that you know you are and let's put that into a story. Hi, guys. My name is Khalil Roberson, and what I'm going to be talking to you guys about today is how to make your first adventure as a dungeon master. Now, I'm firmly of the belief that you don't need to memorize all of the rules in order to run either your first game or your 100th game. I don't have all the rules memorized, although I spend a lot of time reading on Dungeons and Dragons and reading the Dungeon Master rule book. I don't know all the rules, and it doesn't matter. What matters is you are a storyteller and you're a teacher. So if there's something that doesn't work for you while you're doing your adventure, just hand wave it and say whatever, it works or it doesn't work, we'll figure out later. Because you're a storyteller, you're trying to move along your story. You don't need to be stuck sitting there flipping through pages trying to find how Wizards of the Coast, which is the creators of Dungeons and Dragons, or not creators, but the owners of Dungeons and Dragons, ruled how this would work. You don't need to do all that. You just hand wave it and do whatever you want. But we're not going to be talking about rules today. What we're going to be talking about is your first adventure or your first story. So next Monday, I'm actually having my first session, or technically my first session of this new campaign that I'm going to be starting, that you guys are going to be, I'm going to open the doors and let you guys see. So I'm in the process of making the first leg of the adventure. And this is probably the most daunting part of it all, because it's like, all right, what do I need to do? Where do I start? The place where I usually start is I say, you know what? What is something cool that could happen? Or what is a very cool monster or player character race that I'd really like to highlight? And then I just go off of that. So let's say the monster that I think is really cool that I looked inside the monster manual is a kobold. Kobolds are essentially small humanoid dragonoids, or they're dragonoids, but they have they're bipedal and they have arms and they look like people with dragon heads. Kobolds. I really like kobolds. So, all right, I want to make a story revolving around kobolds. Okay. Well, first off, how did the players hear about the kobolds? They need to be somewhere either to have already met or to meet. All right, let me design a town. Let me design a town that will tell them about the kobolds so they can go to it. And then I go through the process of designing the town. What are the landmarks that they're most likely going to need, or the places that they most likely are going to visit? If there's a wizard, I might throw in a library. I might not, because I think this town isn't literate, or the town doesn't care about reading, as it's like a farming town off in the wilderness. I definitely almost always add a tavern, because regardless of what town you're in, who doesn't want to just kick back and drink some ale and just enjoy cheery company? I mean, we do it even in our normal lives right now. I mean, we don't have, actually, yeah, we do have taverns. We have bars where people literally go there and hang out. And even at that, a much more milder setting of this would be a mall, in which you go there and shop and just hang out with people. But so I always include a tavern as a focal point in which adventurers can go and hear stories and whatnot, because who's going to go to the stables to try to get stories unless they're pointed to the stables, or something that they're involved doing has something to do with the stables? So I almost always use a tavern as the central hub of a town. And from there, I build out, all right, I know I got some fighters who are going to need either their weapons repaired if I'm doing some weird mechanic with weapon damage and whatnot, or just to get new weapons. So I'll throw a blacksmith in there. Oh, I got people who really like spells and whatnot. Okay, I'll throw a wizard's tower off in the distance. The town itself is going to need food, so I'll throw some farms there. The town's going to need horses. I'll throw that there. And you just think of what both the town needs and what your players need, and you just fill it out. And as far as coming up with names, what I usually do is just type in random name generator and just pick names from there. Or I just literally make up names on the fly. And that's just how I do it, and that's how I go. So there you go. You've just built your first town. It's not that daunting. Just make up some names for some people, make up some places that they can go. Well, who runs a town? Does the town have no form of government because it's not that big? It's just a little farming town. There's no real need for it. Is there someone who upholds the law? Just answer all these questions and fill in the blanks. And then you got your town. Now, once you have your town, perfect. Now you know where your players need to go. The question really is, how do we get them from the town to the kobolds, right? So if you're doing it in a tavern, which is what I usually do, you have the cliche story of how a man comes through and starts talking in a booming voice, yelling about kobolds that attacked his people. Something like that. You can really just about do anything to link your players to the kobolds. And if you are both a first-time player or a first-time DM with first-time players, it might be best to do it in this fashion. That way they can see a very clear, okay, this guy's talking about kobolds, we got swords, let's go fight them, right? And it both gives you an opportunity to link them to the adventure, and before you even have the man come in, you can literally just let them roam around the tavern and talk to people in the town. You can really give them a sense of who lives in this town, what the environment of this town is. Sorry about that, I got a phone call. What the environment of this town is, the temperament. They can talk to other people, and you can role play with your characters, and you give them time to have a spotlight. They can talk to the other characters and, actually engage in conversation. These are all the different things you can do just by having them start in a tavern. And then once you feel like, okay, they've gotten a good enough time to, get situated, get into the meet and greet of D&D, let me throw the adventure at them now. And then from there, you sit back and wait and see what they do with it. If they say, all right, you know what, let's talk to this guy more. Let's figure out what's happening with these kobolds. You just flesh out a little more of the story, what happened with them. So that's how you start the adventure. Either do it in a tavern or some other central hub. I prefer tavern, especially if you're a first-time DM, simply because it's just easy. It's just much easier to start in a tavern, and it gives you the opportunity to do role-playing and maybe at times combat, but I think the most important part of the game is role-playing because it's what makes D&D unique. So now that you've got your town situated and you've got how they're going to start the adventure, now let's figure out what the hell is happening in the adventure. Why did the kobolds attack these people? Who were these people? What were these people doing? Were they a caravan coming from one city to the other? Did the goblins attack them because they're hungry and they're looking for food and they're just brigands? I just want to raid the local road. There's a road? What's the name of this road? So really what I'm trying to get at is the best and easiest way to create an adventure is to ask questions. This all started because I said, let's create an adventure revolving around kobolds. And then from there, you just ask questions about who, what, where, why, and how the kobolds, right? And as you're asking these questions and filling them out, you're getting all these different things done. Now, once you've answered all these questions, you have two options. You can either write all of it down, which I know there's a lot of DMs who do that, or you can do it the way I do it, in which I just remember it because, yeah, at the end of the day, the story is my story somewhat until the players touch it. So I can change anything and everything as they're moving along. If I find that, oh, well, this may be a little too boring, I can spunk it up and make it a little bit different. So those are the two options you have. You can write down your entire story after you've asked all these questions or not. Now, once the characters go from your town, which you've just fleshed out, to the kobolds, or inside the town, they'll most likely gain all this knowledge from you asking all these questions to yourself about the kobolds. And the people in town might know it, people in town might not. They might discover the answers to all these questions that you asked that now they're asking at the kobolds' hideout, which whatever you want to call it, or wherever you want to call it. And once they're there, you have to prep out the dungeon, which this is where the whole Dungeons and Dragons aspect comes in. Essentially, at its core, what a dungeon is a very set place in which combat, exploration, and role-playing occurs. That's it. It does not have to be underground. It does not need to be contained within walls. You can have a dungeon out in the wilderness. Dungeon is simply a abstract term to mean a place where the players know they can fight, they can explore, and they can roleplay. Period. It's the only place they can do all three. A tavern could be a dungeon. That's what a dungeon is, and that's the whole Dungeons and Dragons part of the game. So you have to create and design this dungeon. Again, the exact same way you created the tavern. Who leads these kobolds? Why do they lead these kobolds? Why do the kobolds attack? What kind of things would exist in this kobold's lair? Where is the kobold's lair? Is it in a town that they had built, or is it deep underground inside of a network of caves? Is there traps? Is there not traps? What have the kobolds done in order to secure themselves? What's the ecology of the place around them? What other creatures would live around them? What other creatures would they be in conflict with in order to have these scarce resources? These are all different questions you need to ask yourself. And as you're asking these questions, you're just filling in your dungeon. And then once you do all that, a lot of times you can either literally make a dungeon in which you just buy a book of lined grid paper and you just sketch out the dungeon and you have the players go through it. Or you can just do what I did once, in which I literally just ad hoc to the entire dungeon. I said, all right, I know I want there to be a throne room. I know I want there to be somewhere that they mine their mushrooms because that's their main sustenance of food. I know I want there to be a cave entrance, barracks, a kitchen, dining hall, and an armory. Bam. Did I draw out the dungeon? No, I just kind of, in the spur of the moment, made up different corridors that would lead down to each of these different rooms. And that was it. And don't think you have to make this huge, sprawling spider web of a dungeon. No, you don't need to do that. You could literally make a very linear dungeon where it's room to room to room to room. Your players won't notice. They'll be too caught up in the combat. They'll be too caught up in, ooh, are these kobolds going to hear us? Don't worry about making it super elaborate unless specifically you want to. You can make it super simple and super basic for your first adventure ever, just so you can get used to it and you can get your players used to going on an adventure. And that's really it. I think what our next video is going to be, which I'll publish probably in a day or two, is going to be about creating a campaign, which a campaign and adventure are two different things, and I'll get more into that in the next video. But I hope you guys enjoyed the content. Please feel free to like and subscribe. I would really appreciate that. And leave a comment down below on what you want to see next. My name is Khalil Roberson, and I'll see you guys next time.